This is harder than just giving birth to a child. There's a lot more drama and things associated with it.
I wanted things in my timing and my way.
You're going in almost to a family group that has never heard the gospel, and there's a representative now.
When you think about what ways foster care and adoption honors God, it is such a great picture of adoption into God's family. And you see God's grace, you see God's sovereignty, and you see God's faithfulness in the midst of it. To be able to care for children that don't have a home, don't have a family, and really don't have a way to get out of their circumstances.
It's a beautiful picture of our salvation. You might not come from a family of a heritage of believers, yet God plucks you from that family and adopts you into His. And so as a Christian, it just seems like a natural thing to adopt people just like God adopted you into His family.
When you think about what biblical truths are helpful when considering adoption, again, we know that God is completely in control. He's sovereign. And we saw that in particular there were various children that we found out about a lot through different family members. In fact, Sierra and Josiah had an older brother that ended up going with his paternal grandmother. And so at that point, we saw that wasn't God's will for us to take the brother as well. And so remembering that God's in complete control through that process. There's never a guarantee that we're going to be able to adopt the child as much as we'd like to. It's just a moment to be able to care for a child without expectations, with not knowing how the story is going to end. It's a moment for us to love on that child as God calls us to.
I don't think that raising adoptive children is different. Sometimes you even forget that they're adopted. The only thing that's a little bit different is with your birth kids, when they do something, you kind of understand it because they typically have the same problems and the same thought process that you do. It's genetic. Sometimes the adopted kids, I will be like, why did you do that? I don't understand. So the personality-wise, sometimes they're a little puzzling and mysterious, but most of the time, I don't even think of our family as an adopted family. They're just our kids. There isn't a difference between the birth kids and the adopted kids. They're all the same. And I'm not saying that as a cliche or to be kind, but it really is true. I feel the same about all of them and parent all of them similarly. I mean, obviously they have different things that, you have to make tweaks with parenting, but.
When you think about the bond between a birth child and the parent, there's also that bond with the adopted child. When you bring an adopted child into your home, that bond comes pretty quickly. And it's a great picture, again, of the gospel when you consider us being grafted into God's family and God's perfect love for us. One of the great joys of being an adoptive parent is to consider the alternative of where that child would have been, and to be able to raise them in a gospel-centered home and to provide them with love, to bring them to church, and to have them involved with small groups and with friends from church, and to be able to see a community of people who love Christ is a great gift.
Yeah, and if they become believers someday, it's like you're breaking that multi-generational cycle. Do you know what I mean? Like more than likely their parents and grandparents weren't believers. Do you know what I mean? You're going in almost to a family group that has never heard the gospel, and there's a representative now who has heard and is learning and being discipled. I can't guarantee that the 5 kids I bring into my house that I adopt, or even all 7 actually, I don't have control over their salvation, but I do have control over their discipleship and teaching and training them. And so your prayer is that something new will come from that family line. Now there's a faithful remnant that's going to come from maybe a multi-generational, non-believing family line.
It was really neat to see with our existing kids how they opened up their arms and welcomed the new children and loved on them instantly. And really, as a family, being able to do this ministry together and everybody have a part in that. It's not just mom and dad, but the existing kids are a part of that as well, whether it's rocking them, feeding them, playing with them.
Without us even having to ask. They just naturally did it.
Yeah.
The first 3 kids we had were were significantly older than the second group of adopted. So it was really cool to see their motherly and fatherly instincts, and they just really took the kids under their wings. It was something really special to watch.
The idea of an adopted child having a relationship with their biological parents, I really think is on a case-by-case basis. So with our 5 adoptions, as we considered each scenario, there are some that are more mild and some that are pretty severe. So we really have to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis. Is it a situation that's going to be a positive one for the child? Is it going to cause chaos or confusion in their lives? But also, if it is a mild situation, is it an opportunity where we can share the gospel with the birth parent?
Yeah, I agree. Case-by-case scenario. I've encouraged the kids who have maybe more severe, like where it's not safe to be with their birth parents. I really encourage them someday when they're older, and if they feel safe, to go and share the gospel with their parents and their families, to look them up at that opportunity. Typically, if you are taken away by the state in foster care, it's not mild. Typically, there's something really horrific that's happened. And if their rights get severed, it's been because something horrific. The bar's pretty high, so safety definitely comes in. We've been really careful as far as, we'll have a Facebook account and we'll post pictures and videos and have a relationship kind of in the safety of them not knowing where we live, but being able to see their child grow and be able to write messages to each other, but maybe not as much as seeing them in person.
Navigating, communicating adoption to a child is really, again, on a case-by-case basis. Our first adoption, she had always known that she was adopted, but we chose not to tell her who the biological parents were until she was a little bit older, because it was a pretty close family member, and we thought that that might be a detriment to her. And with the other kids, again, case-by-case, they always knew that they were adopted, and they knew that they were loved in our home, but we had to evaluate when was the right time to communicate that to each child.
Yeah, I would say most knew they were adopted as soon as they could understand what that meant. We didn't really keep that a secret. It was always an open subject.
But it was an opportunity to then express, we've been adopted by Christ.
And I don't think they fully understood it either. Like some of them still thought that they were in my tummy. I remember them getting confused. So it was like a long process of them just trying to grip, like, what does this mean? And still thinking I gave birth to them. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, I didn't. So just, yeah, it was always kind of an open discussion. I don't feel like there was very much secrecy.
Even Josie at 5 still asks questions about being in mommy's tummy.
Yeah.
The adoption process can be hard, but just because something is hard doesn't mean you don't do it. If God has called you to do something, He'll provide you with exactly what you need to accomplish it.
I always compare it to like trying out for the FBI, because they come in and they inspect your house. They ask you super personal questions. I remember telling Mike, they know more about me than my parents do. They write like a research paper on you. You're a worker for your licensing agency. Their job is to do a full report. Personality tests. What else did we have to? I'm trying to think of all the different things that we had to do. We had to show them our budget. We had to do a family tree and explain the divorces and all the things in our family tree. Just really intense, which I didn't know when I was getting involved in this. It was a very long process. Lots of classes that you have to take besides CPR and those basic things, just hours and hours of classes. But once again, totally worth it, but very intense. I think I learned that I didn't understand. I thought I was in control more, and I think adoption and foster care made me realize I'm not really in control of anything. Because when you're in that system, you really do not have a say. The judges, the lawyers, the DCS workers, they're all deciding for you what's going to happen to this child, and you're really just kind of a caretaker. So it was really just relying on God and knowing that He was in control, and there was nothing I could be doing. I'm kind of a doer, and there was no like checklist of like, if I do this, this, and this, then I'll get the baby. It was just having to just relax and just trust that God knew what was best for us and what was best for the child and His plan. So I think that's what I learned, was His sovereignty and just trusting Him.
Through foster care, I saw more of my sin which is good to be able to see and then to run from. Trusting the Lord for his provision and patience, really just dying to self through this process because I wanted things in my timing and my way, and remembering that the Lord's ways and the Lord's timing are completely perfect.
I agree with his patience one, because sometimes the child who comes into your home has never been disciplined, has been neglected, hasn't been fed, has issues beyond what you're used to, and having to adapt and train. It's one thing to train a child from a baby up to 2. It's another thing for a 2-year-old to enter your home who had no upbringing. That's definitely very challenging.
If I was going to send a message to who I was back when we started foster care and adoption, I would tell that guy, trust the Lord.
That the road will be hard, but it'll be worth it.
For anyone considering foster care or adoption, it would be great to surround yourself with other families who've been through the process, but even people who haven't been through the process that will pray with you, pray for you, and come alongside you during that, because it is a long journey and we need to surround ourselves with other believers who are going to encourage us.
I would say too, to have your house in order. How's my relationship with my spouse? How's my relationship with my kids? Because it does rock your world a bit. You're definitely adding a trial. It's a good trial, but it is a trial. So if you're already kind of shaky, your foundation has cracks, it's going to make it a little bit worse. And so definitely evaluating, where am I spiritually? Where am I? Am I doing a good job as a wife or a husband currently? Am I doing a good job as a mother or a father currently? And just praying over that before deciding this, because this is harder than just giving birth to a child. There's a lot more drama and things associated with it. It makes it a little bit more difficult.
Our experience with adoption is a great illustration of the gospel. To see kids who couldn't change their circumstances and couldn't merit anything that would change what they were going through. And so we see that with our situation where we were helpless in our sin and unable to merit anything to appease God, and God in his perfect love provided the way for us to escape, to be forgiven of our sin, reconciled to him, and adopted into his family. And being a part of his family is a great picture for us to see with adoption with our kids. Looking back, we would do it all over again.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to our Redeemer YouTube channel. If this is helpful for you, please make sure that you like this video, smash the subscribe button, and hit that bell icon. It will help us reach more people with biblical truth. Thank you so much.